Hello there, and welcome to episode 10 of Stories from a Bar. I'm your host, Chris Osborne, and I am hanging out at Indian Ladder Farms with Dietrich Gehring. Pronounced right? Excellent. It's always my biggest concern when I start these things. Owner of the cidery and brewery here on the premises. Dietrich, thank you for hanging out and taking this opportunity to talk with me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Of course, I tried to stop by here once before, and I vastly underestimated the crowd size that was going to be here when I last attempted.
Yeah, you showed up on a Saturday in October. That's, that can be...
it's been years.
It can be hard to get anything.
Yes, and it's been years since I've been here. I've forgotten how massive this place actually is.
Yeah, we've grown quite a bit probably since the last time you were here, too. So crowds are a little bit bigger on the busy weekends.
Like I said, I originally planned to do this about a month ago, and I apologize to the millions of listeners out there if my voice seems off. I had a lot of fun at a Metallica concert last night, and it's before noon today. But I was able, when I was here on that, it was a beautiful Saturday, of course, first day of fall. And,
yeah, it's a little gloomy today. But...
Yeah, it's a little gloomy today, and it's getting colder as the days pass by. But I did have the opportunity to try some of the great hard ciders and one or two of the beers. I had the Pilsner. That was really good.
Oh, yeah. Which one did you have? The Gills Pills, I think?
That may have been it. I don't remember now. So, Indian Ladder Farms. Why don't we start off? Give me a little backstory on the farm. I know it's about 102 years old, which...
This is true. It is 102 years old. My wife is the fourth generation on the farm. My son, if he decides to come back to the farm after college, will be fifth generation. It started out as a dairy farm. Was a dairy farm up until about the 40s, and when the barn burned, and then they went to beef cattle and started planting the apple orchards. Once the orchards came into production, it became a commodity apple orchard, and it was that way right up until about 1965, I think. And then my father-in-law decided to do direct sales off what we're sitting on the front porch here. And that proved to be successful. And eventually the commodity market for small apple orchards sort of disappeared as big farms out west sort of took that over, and then eventually China took over the entire sort of apple industry as far as commodity and juice and like that. So we sort of moved full force into direct sales. We do some small wholesale here to local Hannafords and some other small stores, but most everything is sold right out the front door here, including now beer and cider, hard cider.
Yeah. And the farm, the entire time it's been operational, has been in the Teneyck family?
Yeah, that is correct.
Founded by Peter Teneyck, right?
Yep.
In 1916.
Yep, one of the many Peter Teneycks.
And you guys had and I learned a lot of this because you guys had a great detailed history on the actual website, so that was very convenient.
Yes. Well, it gets, people ask all the time, so finally we had to get something down in writing for people. Here, go look at the website.
And as I was doing some research and I scrolled through that, I didn't realize this is actually made up of 5 different farms that were purchased over time.
Yeah, Laurie's great-great-grandfather, the original Peter Teneyck, he was congressman, and he was commissioner of agriculture. And this farm was kind of set up as a kind of a showcase farm. He was a Cornell graduate, and so it was was kind of like a dairy farm that you would come to see like modern techniques and like that. They had an award-winning Guernsey cattle herd here, and it was a pretty big deal in its day. And he kept buying smaller farms, and eventually, it ended up being 5 farms, and we're about 320 acres now.
And that is massive. You gave me an awesome tour, and just getting a small feel of the scope, walking around and seeing some of the things available is really impressive.
Yeah, and one of the things that's nice, I don't know if when you were driving out here, you noticed we're in an area where there aren't many farms anymore, or at least, there is some open farmland, but encroachment's becoming pretty heavy on us. So about 12 years ago, we sold the development rights to the farm. So we have an agricultural easement on the farm. Mm-hmm. So what it basically means is we when we sold the development rights, we could sell the farm if we wanted to another agricultural practice, but it can never become housing development or anything like that.
That's wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think preserving, that's part of what my wife and I are about is making sure that there is agriculture in these areas.
So even after the Ten Eyck family is gone one day, if it happens, it would still be.
It could only be like my son or his grandson. Or my brother-in-law's children, they could only sell it to be another farming enterprise. I mean, it could be it doesn't necessarily have to be an apple orchard or, something like that, but it will always be farmland.
So you mentioned the farm kind of starting out as a dairy farm. I know that ended pretty much when it was the dairy barn that burned down, right?
Yeah, they had
1949.
Yeah, they had a spontaneous hay combustion, and it burned the barn down. They were able to get the cattle out, and they decided at that point that Lori's grandfather decided that he didn't really want to carry on with the dairy business.
Was it a matter of it being kind of a pain in the ass to rebuild, or not
a huge expense?
Yeah.
I mean, and he had moved into insurance at that point, so he wasn't as active on the farm. And so they decided they ran beef cattle here for a while they were planning out the orchard. So eventually, after about 10 years when the trees were, mature, they sold off the beef cattle, and then it became a full-fledged apple orchard, and it's been that way ever since.
So how was the apple business before the Pick Your Own started? Was it?
It was all, it was all wholesale. So basically what used to happen is, it was very different than it is now. I mean, we picked in, 1 bushel boxes, and it went on tractor trailers, and it shipped out of here, and most of it went for juice.
Oh, okay.
That was the primary use for it. A lot of it went for like baby food for Beech Nut and places like that. But eventually, all those industries. There used to be a huge cider mill right in Voorheesville. It was Mott's, and they're completely gone. Beech Nut's gone. All those businesses went away, moved to other areas, and also as the commodity market changed. It was very hard for a 320 acres sounds, big, but when you're talking like apples grown out in the Yakima Valley or something on a 2,000 acre apple farm, that's they can definitely have a
oh wow
scale is very hard to compete with that. So that's what happened. We have buildings here. They're called controlled atmosphere. We call them CA buildings, and they're kind of interesting. And we're going to start using them again. But back in the day, we used to use them. So we would put the apples in what's called suspended animation, basically. Mm-hmm. So we pump all the oxygen out of the building. It's a completely sealed, insulated building, and pump in nitrogen. So the apples would they essentially go to sleep until you open those doors up again.
Oh, wow.
So we could open up, the doors in July, and the apples would be like the day they went in there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which sounds really great, and that was a way for us to compete a little bit until they did that in the Pacific Northwest, and they would do like massive buildings, and they would flood the market with, last year's apples at the time that we were picking this year's apples at half the price.
Oh, wow.
So very hard to.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you could preserve the apples like that.
Yep, and we just restored those buildings actually this past year, and we're looking at the cider. The cider market is in a boom period right now. It's like up 400%. So we're now looking at the possibility of pressing cider year round, and we do have an apple press here on the farm, and we could start using those buildings again, and that way we could press off season.
And we were talking about where the dairy barn burned down, a new military type building.
Yeah, well, 1949.
Back then.
We built what's called a Quonset hut, which is,
Yes.
Quonset is, I believe it's I can't remember the name of the tribe, Connecticut Indian tribe. It means longhouse. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it, it's kind of like a giant metal longhouse.
That's exactly what it looked like. But I was really interested in the plans you have.
Yeah, so we're looking at starting here in a couple of weeks. Of turning that into a much bigger brewery. Right now on site we have a 3-barrel brewery that was built locally by a company called Fraunhofer, and part of what's nice about dealing with Fraunhofer, aside from the fact that they're very local, is that they were able to essentially give us this 3-barrel brewery while they're building our 20-barrel brewery.
Nice.
So it doesn't really give us enough beer. On a busy weekend, we're still selling out of all the beer that we make. So we're pretty excited to be getting the 20-barrel here, hopefully in the spring.
Then I'm looking forward to seeing that. I know it'll take some time, but it sounds like it's going to be pretty awesome when it gets up and running.
We're hoping by next September that is fully up and running.
Nice. I am curious, what were people's reactions when they started the pick your own apples? I know it was like back in the 70s.
Yeah,
when it started.
It became kind of it's a phenomenon. I mean, it's like, we have lines for people.
Became a big draw real quick.
Oh yeah, and now it's a primary part of our apple business is pick your own. We have sections of the orchard that are just designated for pick your own only now, and it became a way also for us, not just with the apples. We started spring pick your own by planting blueberries and raspberries. So it's a way to get people out to the farm, and it's a way to get people out here multiple times. And now, that we have the brewery and cidery and the cafe and so on, it's, it gives them a reason to stay. Dad has something to do.
Yeah, it's like a dad daycare.
Right, dad daycare, mom might be gluten-free, so, we've got hard cider for her, and, vice versa.
Nice. It's funny, when I look forward to fall. Summer's probably my favorite season. Then, of course, after a couple months, I'm ready for fall to come in. And two things come to mind immediately for when I think of fall, and that's first off my hatred of everything pumpkin spice.
Yeah, yeah, you and me both.
And then,
fortunately, our brewer and I have we agree on that. But
and then second is apples. I've always loved apples.
Yeah.
So that's what jumps out to me at fall, and that's when I really start drinking the ciders and everything like that. And
right, we've toyed around with a couple of pumpkin related things, but the pumpkin beers and like that, they're really just about the spice. There's nothing really to do with the pumpkin. The pumpkin just doesn't add much of anything to it. So,
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So we've tried to steer away from that. My wife feels completely differently about that. She's more on the marketing end and feels that we should be providing that. So on occasion, we'll buy someone else's beer that's a pumpkin beer and serve that.
And of course, the third thing I think of are apple cider donuts, which are absolutely delicious.
Yeah, that's the second phenomena. It's hard to believe that people will actually wait in line an hour.
And that wasn't even introduced till the 70s, around that time frame too, right?
Yeah, my father-in-law got a couple of donut robots. I think we're up to 6 now, and it's still an hour and a half wait on a busy weekend to get a donut.
Yeah, when I showed up on that one Saturday, I wanted to get some donuts, and the line was probably about a quarter mile long.
Yeah, that's the case. We're actually exploring the possibility of doing a much larger, like a donut pavilion, because it's sort of grown into
That sounds magical.
Yeah. So on a really busy weekend here, it'll be like an hour and a half to get a donut, but it's only about 20 minutes to get a beer. So
Priorities.
you can if you come with a group of people, you can divide and conquer.
Exactly. You have one person stand in the donut line while the other one runs beers back and forth.
Exactly.
And holds the spot when you need to use the bathroom.
We're trying to figure out ways to make the lines longer, but it's one of those things. Every time we add more, it never really changes. It's like the line is still the same, even though we've added more donut robots, we've made the brewery bigger, or we're making more cider, which these are great problems to have, but you feel bad for somebody who's waiting in line that long.
Well, just judging by the response they still have, I assume the cider donut took off pretty quickly, along with the pick your own apple.
Yeah, it did, and yeah, I can't tell you how many donut robots we've gone through over the years.
And we were talking about all the different kinds of apples earlier. How many varieties? Is there like over 40 varieties?
Yeah, I think we're up to like 46 if you count some of the experimental varieties. The Teneiks have always been very closely involved with Cornell. So
and I've read about that, and I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, so my father-in-law, his grandfather, his father, and he all went to Cornell, and along with one of his nieces. So there's sort of a long history there. He was on the board of trustees.
And do they have a fruit testing program?
Yeah, they do. Exactly they grow out a lot of the varieties that you come to know and love, like Honeycrisp and the new one Snapdragon. Those were all developed at Cornell.
Really?
Yeah, and a lot of those things get tested here. So various farms are, and we're one of them that they put numbers on things, and sometimes you'll see in the store, Cornell number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that's an experimental variety that hasn't received a name yet, and in some cases may not.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they will nix that one and over something else. It either has some sort of production problem or disease. It's not disease resistant enough or something, and they'll nix it for something better.
I'm curious, what are the goals of the program? Or is it just experiment and see what they can produce?
Yeah, it's a research. It's a research program for apples. I mean, there's literally thousands of varieties of apples.
Oh yeah.
So apples and hops too are this way. So all the apples you see out there, they don't come from seed. So they're all clones.
Okay.
So everything is grafted onto, a certain sturdy rootstock and then grown on that. So it all comes from a few, mother plants essentially. And what's interesting about that is that hops are the same way, and then we grow hops here on the farm, that they're all clones too. And what's interesting also is that, so if you plant an apple seed, so you've got your favorite Honeycrisp apple and you take the seeds out of it, there is 100% chance that you are not getting that apple.
Oh, wow.
It'll be any number of things. It may taste awful. It could be bitter. It could be, so that's why they graft everything. It's the same with hops. So if you allow seeds to grow in your hop yard, they will be any number of things. But that said, that's also how we find new varieties of things.
Interesting.
So
I was also, of course, as I was scrolling through the farm's history there, I noticed it mentioned Indian Ladder is one of 18 eco apple growers in New England and New York.
Yeah, we're part of...
what exactly is...
Well, eco apples, it's a group of apple growers that we adhere to a certain, protocol of practices. We're all IPM farms, which means it's integrated pest management. So there's a lot of scouting of bugs and disease and stuff. So it's a heavier management system. So, my father-in-law and Chris, and Tim, who are the farm and assistant farm managers, are out there driving around all the time. They have traps out. They're looking for bugs. They're counting bugs. They're checking for scab and all that. And what it basically is by having a more stringent management program, you're trying not to spray as much.
Okay.
So you're trying to keep it, and that's why it's eco apples, because we're not organic, but we're trying to keep it down to the bare minimum of what we have to use so we don't lose the crop.
How important is it to keep that distinction for you guys? I think it's pretty
very
important.
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, it's important for us from an ecological and moral standpoint. I mean, we raise our children here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be putting anything into the water or onto the fruit that we think is a problem. And it's also a marketing and a financial situation, because from a marketing standpoint, people are very aware of where their food is coming from, and they don't want to, be eating things that they think are bad for them. But on the other hand, it's very expensive and very difficult to grow organic apples on any kind of scale.
So what are the biggest challenges then of trying to keep that eco tag? Or eco-friendly?
Well, yeah, I think it's basically, everything, by doing the proper management, what it means is, and this goes for hops as well, is that we are constantly trying to do things that are preventative instead of reactionary.
Okay.
So basically, we haven't done our job if we are seeing a complete outbreak of disease or insects. It means that we haven't, done the preventative care that, it could mean that our trees aren't healthy because unhealthy trees, are more susceptible to disease and attack from insects. So it's very important to keep everything, on a very healthy level. And at least that goes for hops as well. Generally, by the time you see disease or, an infestation, you're pretty much lost the battle because, wholesale spraying is not good. I mean, it generally it's a reactionary thing. It generally doesn't work very well, and it's also hugely expensive.
That does not surprise me. I'm curious. What's the most popular kind of apple?
I'd say right now it's Honeycrisp.
Does it change with like week to week?
Well, not year to year. It changes. There's cycles. It's like. When I was growing up, the Red Delicious was a hugely popular apple, and I think that we have torn most of those orchards out.
Oh, really?
It's just not a very popular apple anymore. It's very starchy, and so people's tastes change.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's beer or cider or apples or anything like that.
You have a personal favorite when it comes to apples?
I like an apple called the Macallan.
The McCown, that's a good one, yeah.
And I do like Honeycrisp quite a bit, too.
I always have the fallback Macintosh, but
yep.
I haven't had an apple where I've been like, oh, God, I hate this apple.
Yeah. I have a few I don't like.
I've always liked Macintosh and Granny Smiths have kind of been the fallback. The Honeycrisp is good, yeah. But the McCown I've enjoyed, too, yeah.
Yeah, so we're planting, or we have planted over the last few years, a lot more cider varieties here on the farm. So we're tasting a lot of those, and we just started pressing some of those, and we can give you some samples of some of that downstairs.
I won't turn down any samples.
Yeah, they're older varieties like Dabonet and Porter's Perfection. We're growing things like Kingston Black, and these are old cider varieties.
Mm-hmm.
They have higher sugar contents, the higher tannins. They're generally called bitters and sharps, and the vast majority of apples that grow wild or in the world are cider varieties, and they may not be as desirable as most of what we grow here are dessert apples.
Mm-hmm.
Eating apples, pie apples. We do have some crossovers, like Northern Spy is considered an eating apple and a cider variety.
Oh, wow.
So
obviously you guys do a big business in the fall.
Yes, that's our. We have to make all our money in like 6 weekends.
And we talked a little bit about this earlier. I know the market area closes down in the winter, but what's farm life like in the winter then? I know the brewery's going to be open year round.
The brewery's open. January is really the only kind of really quiet month here. And February is, a little bit on the quiet side, but as soon as March rolls around and we can get back out into the fields, we're back out there. I mean, there's pruning going on starting in January and February. Every tree on the farm gets pruned every year. So we have a crew that comes in from Vermont, contract crew, and then we also have a local crew that comes on for that. But
Is weather really the biggest challenge to maintaining?
I pruned
keeping
for a
everything
couple
running?
of years before I was smart enough to go to college. And pruning's brutal. You're out there in all kinds of weather. It's freezing rain, and you're out there running a chainsaw, and it's not fun work. But it does have to get done.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it.
I came across an interesting article the other day. Actually, well, earlier than the other day, the other day when I planned to try to record this a month ago. But you guys have gotten into growing hemp on the farm.
Yeah, that was
is
sort
really
of
interesting. I'm curious how that came about.
It came about because we grow hops, and I'm not smart enough to say I'm not starting to grow another crop that hasn't been grown in the state for 100 years. So I have a severe early adopter problem.
I didn't realize hemp and hops are from the same family, right?
Yeah, they're very closely related. One's an annual, one's a perennial. They do have some differences in the way they grow and the way they're harvested, but they do have some very, very strong similarities that are. The research on it is very interesting, and they're trying to breed some of the terpenes from marijuana into hops to try to change some of the flavors, because hops are kind of an ancient plant that doesn't have sex very well and genetically change. So it's very hard to get, and takes a very long time to get new varieties of hops. Whereas marijuana, you can change in a couple of generations, very quickly. So they're trying to see if they can pull some of the things out of, of hemp for hops and get some of those unique flavors that they're able to produce.
What are there? I'm curious about the legal requirements and all kinds. Are there permits and things behind trying to grow hemp?
It's been changing, actually. Well, it's been evolving. Let's say, we planted it. We are working through Morrisville University out at SUNY Morrisville, and so we're part of a research project. So we were given the seed by them. And we're providing data points for them. They had some, we had to do 3 different plots, and do 3 different fertilizations and 3 different care structures for them. And then we provide them with that data, and then they enter it in, so that, what we're trying to figure out, is this a crop that is lucrative for the New York State farmer? And then the next step is, what the hell do we do with it? And that's sort of where I'm at right now. I have a lot of seed right now. I'm not sure what we're going to do.
So
with.
Is it monitored to but make sure it doesn't get past like a certain THC level? Is
so
that how it works?
we have to be below. I think it's 3%, and I think ours tested out at 0.05 THC. Which is, it was a varietal that we kind of knew that was not going to go above that. Weather conditions can change it, but we had some independent testing, and then it came in at the right numbers, and then Ag and Markets actually came out and did some testing on it, and found that the numbers were the same, so we didn't have to destroy the crop. Which we're a little concerned about.
It'd be ironic if they burned the crop because it was too high.
Yeah, and what's amazing about I don't know what your familiarity is with hemp or cannabis in any respect, but it is exactly the same plant. So 6 acres of hemp frankly reeks. and when we had it combined, it was like blowing into the beer garden, and people were like, "What is going on over there?" And I was like, "Well, we're harvesting our seeds."
Thinking people are just getting lit up out in the field.
Yeah, exactly. You'd probably have to smoke half an acre to receive any benefit from it, but So don't bother trying.
I have no intention.
Okay.
Honestly. What do you think surprises people the most when they come out to this farm? And like I said, I came here. It was the first time in a few years, a month ago, and honestly, I was surprised by how much bigger it was than I remembered. But
Yeah, well, I had a guy a couple weekends ago, and I was standing in the beer garden, and he came up to me, and it was just wall-to-wall people, and there's people picking pumpkins and apples and standing in line for donuts and, eating and drinking, and he goes, "So what's going on here?" And I said, "What do you mean, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, is there an event or something?" And I said, "No, this is it.
Just another day on the farm."
You're looking at it. It's like, this is just another Saturday here in the fall. He goes, "Wow, this is something else." So, yeah, I think people are surprised that there isn't a circus or something going on here.
Just the crowd that it draws.
Yeah.
What have been some of your favorite stories?
Favorite stories here on the farm? Well...
Anything that jumps out?
They're putting me on the spot here.
One of my favorite already, as we were walking around, I commented how I like the taps down in the tap room because it looked like it was from a giant barrel, which apparently is an old hot tub.
Yes, it was my wife's and our hot tub, and we were looking for some place to put the taps in, and like I was telling you, we're farmers. We don't throw anything away, so. Well, let's cut that thing in half and let's put the taps in it.
It works well.
It does. It's a nice piece. It was an old redwood barrel. It has more history than that. Up above us here on the escarpment is Thatcher Park, which is one of the older state parks. Gorgeous piece of property that overlooks the farm. And they used to have a gigantic swimming pool up there. And that barrel originally came from the swimming pool.
Oh, wow.
And they put it up for auction, so I bought it and made a hot tub out of it, and now it's our taps.
Nice. What do you what's the toughest part of keeping this place going? I know we were walking around, you're talking about all the construction projects and things that are being updated. Is it just basically constant maintenance at this point and trying to handle expansions?
Yeah, it's keeping a lot of balls in the air, because we do have so many moving parts here. I mean, let's say we have an educational component on the farm where we do school groups. And,
we were talking about that, like 20 tours a day sometimes.
Yeah, we have school buses rolling in here all the time. A funny story is a few years ago, I had the opportunity to be in a receiving line with our junior senator, Kirsten Gillibrand, and so you're going down the line, and you got your little badge on, and you've got 2 seconds to talk to the senator. You don't want to say anything stupid,
More than enough time to establish
more than enough time to embarrass yourself, and so I said, I thank you, Senator, for all your. I appreciate, your support of upstate agriculture in the Senate. And she looks at me and reads my badge and goes, "I know you." And I'm like, "Ooh." She said, "I've been to your farm." She goes, "I came there on a yellow school bus." So, that's how long this
I think any kid in this area has been here on a yellow school bus.
But you don't think about your senator as have coming, and she's like, "I bring my kids there now." So,
oh, that's cool.
Okay. She was very nice, but she sort of put me on the spot. "I know you."
Doesn't sound threatening at all.
No. She didn't know me. She knew the farm.
What's your favorite event you guys do? I know just following your Facebook and Twitter feeds, it always looks like there's something cool coming up. I know you guys just did
I think
Halloween themed.
We did a Halloween theme on All Souls. We have a Renaissance fair.
That's right, the Renaissance fair.
In June, which draws about 5,000 people, and that same group does a All Souls Festival Halloween thing. Currently, I'm really enjoying the Hawaiian Oktoberfest, where we have a Hawaiian band play, and we carve Stein apples, and people wear lederhosen and Hawaiian shirts.
That sounds awesome.
So we're sort of like, the Oktoberfest is so predictable, I was like, what can we do that's a little different?
Put a little touch on it.
And a friend of ours goes, "I just started a ukulele band." We're like, "Oh, wow, Hawaiian Oktoberfest, let's do that."
So you have a book in front of you.
Yes.
And I had read about the book earlier. Why don't we talk about this book here? The Hop Grower's Handbook.
Yeah, so like I said, I have the problem of being an early adopter, and so about 8 years ago, we decided that we were going to try to grow hops on the farm. I mean, I'd grown them for about 25 years as a home brewer, just casually in my garden and so on, and so I'd gone to a couple of seminars on it and thought, well, let's see if we can grow 100 of them. We've grown 10. Unfortunately, that was successful, so we decided to put in 1,000. And we've expanded out to 2,500 plants, which is pretty small in the hop world. But for us, it's pretty big and challenging. And as we got into about the fourth year of growing hops, and we were approached by a publisher to do a book, and we were kind of hesitant to do it because we didn't really, know. We didn't feel like we were the authorities on it or anything. But they were like, well, we really want somebody who's sort of going, working their way through it. And I said, well, we're certainly those people. We can tell you what not to do. And so that's sort of a lot of what the book is about, is like, don't do this. You'd be better off doing this kind of stuff. So it's for small scale hop production. It tells you basically if you want to grow a few plants in your yard as a home brewer, it's going to tell you how to do that, and then kind of how to scale up to like about 1 acre. And it's been extraordinarily successful book. We were very surprised, or pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and you and your wife put it together?
Yeah, she did all the writing on it, and she did all the research. What we found when we originally started doing it, there wasn't really a good small-scale book out there. And the research and everything was everywhere. I mean, it was at, Corvallis University in Oregon. There was some good research. University of Vermont was doing some really, good research, but it was really scattered. And then there was a lot of bizarre misinformation about growing hops. So my wife was a journalist for a period of time, so she's really good at pulling all that stuff together and asking people, hard questions, and didn't take, for granted that, everybody knew various agricultural terms. She was like, it's like, tell me what pH is, it's like, and why is it important, kind of thing, instead of just saying you have to have the proper pH, so it's very good. It's a very, as Steve Miller called it, and he's our hop specialist here in New York State. He said it's kind of, it's like the first cookbook for growing hops on a small scale.
Interesting.
So
what do you think? Obviously, you guys have the cidery and brewery here. I mean, for you, what do you think's been the biggest change you've seen the farm go through then?
We're seeing a lot of new people. We're seeing a lot of younger people. We're seeing a lot of young families. The late 20-something, early 30-something families, because we're really providing a very, we're serving alcohol here, but it's a very family-oriented place. There's not a lot of people drunk and carrying on.
There's definitely the animals and
there's
a lot
stuff
of things
for the kids to do, and there's
one of the largest cows or
no, I don't know if Rosie. Rosie's the oldest.
So, she's 21 years old.
Yes,
and
we have a Scottish Highlander, and she's about 21 years old.
That was amazing to see that.
Yeah, she's great, and people now know her, and people have grown. Kids have grown up around her, and she's actually on one of our beer labels. But yeah, as far as we're seeing a lot with the cidery and brewery. We're seeing a lot of new faces, and we're seeing a lot of them return to come out that they didn't know that we did all the things that we do. So they're now putting their kids in the educational programs and stuff like that.
And we talked a little bit about expanding the brewery up a little bit in the next couple of years. What any other big projects going on around the farm?
Isn't that enough? No.
Where would you like to see the farm go? Is there something you'd like to?
Well, our motto is to always try to leave it better than you found it.
Okay,
so
that's a good motto to have.
It's like we were very fortunate. generationally speaking, to be handed a very a very good brand of Indian Ladder Farms and a very established business. So it's sort of under our care. The feeling is that we're supposed to move the mantle forward for the next generation.
Nice. Definitely a nice way to have, a nice motto to have, and a nice way to live in general.
Yes.
Really.
Yes, that and play nice.
Just be nice to people. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard.
Don't be a dick to people.
Exactly.
And things tend to work out.
So you kids play nice.
Well, Dietrich, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and talk about the farm and the history. I'll be talking to Scott
Veltman is
Veltman.
Our head brewer. He came on board in February. He has a great brewing history for a young guy. And he's done 6 years at Brewery Ommegang and
Ommegang, yep.
Yep.
In Cooperstown.
So he has a great Belgian brewing background, and then he was a couple of years at the pump station in Albany, and before he came on with us, he really likes the idea of the farm brewery movement and to be able to use stuff grown right here on the farm. So,
well, thank you again, and I'll be back with Scott. So I'm back with Scott Veltman, brewer here at Indian Ladder Cidery and Brewery. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, man. Like I said, thanks for taking a few moments to come up and chat with me about some of the brewing going on. So why don't you tell me a bit about yourself? How'd you get into brewing?
Oh, geez. Let's see here. I got into brewing back in 2000. Well, it was probably like 2006, 2007 when I first started home brewing.
All right.
And I found a school up in Montreal that did a program for fermentation science and brewing micro. And so went up there, did a couple of years, and came back down into the States and got a job at Brewery Ommegang. I worked there.
Which is fantastic. I haven't been out there. I haven't been out there. I need to. It's only like an hour and a half drive.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful too.
It just looks massive.
Yeah. Because they do like 46,000 barrels a year.
Yeah.
And I was worked there for 6.5 years, and then decided to leave there and continue on in my journey, and ended up at C.H. Evans Brewing Company at Albany Pump Station.
I did a previous episode there.
Oh, very cool. So you know Sam.
I haven't met Sam.
Did you meet Ryan?
I didn't meet... Well, when I went there, I talked to a awesome guy with a fantastic mustache named Craig Gravina, who he doesn't...
Oh, yeah, I know Craig Gravina.
Oh, you know Craig?
Yeah, I know Craig.
Yeah, I talked to him. I did a previous episode talking about Albany and Albany Ale and Albany's history and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was fun being there because we could mess around and bring back all these historic beers.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really fun. And I remember the first brew that I did there when I was there, but it was probably about like 3 years ago. We did a Belgian quad ale because Ryan thought it was funny. It's like, oh, you know what? It's like, we'll do a Belgian beer. It's like, you just came back from a Belgian brewery. Let's just go with this. So we did the revamped version of the Union Station Quad, and we ended up winning a gold medal at Tap New York for best beer in New York 2 years in a row, actually. We got the Governor's Cup 1 year, and then we just got like a gold ale for, I think it was a Belgian strong ale category. And kept doing that and brewing beers down there and having fun in the pub atmosphere, because it was funny working in a production brewery and then going into like a small brew pub.
Yep.
And now I'm here at Indian Ladder, where I just came on board here in February of this year. And it's even funnier because it's even smaller. Started with a 60 barrel system. Now I'm down to when I first got here, it was a 3/4 barrel system.
Yeah.
Which is about, 24 gallons or something like that. And then now we just got our 3-barrel, which we got back in... When did we get the brew system? The cellar came on my first day, which is pretty cool. So Dieter got a brewer, and he got the fermentation cellar. But the brew house came at the beginning of May, and we've just been cranking out brews left and right on that thing.
Yeah, that's what Dietrich was telling me. You guys sell out from time to time on the weekends and things like that.
Yeah, it's great. And we just, now that I'm here, like, get a lot more things to experiment with, especially being in the farm atmosphere. And now we're using like our barley that we grow here, because we do like 12 acres of Tinkel malt, which is a German variety.
Mm-hmm. Now, are most of the ingredients you just use straight from the farm here, right?
Yep. About 95% of the ingredients that we use are straight from the farm. And then like we'll use some hops from, Australia, New Zealand, and out on the West Coast, because we we can get our hands on some experimental hops from a company that we work really closely with, especially with the hop yard. It's Hopsteiner.
Mm-hmm.
They're out in Yakima, Washington. So we have a lot of friends out there, and they kind of help us out. Like, they actually gave us rhizomes to one of the first proprietary hops.
Yep.
It actually is the only proprietary hop they've actually sold to anyone outside of the West Coast.
Oh, wow.
So this year we just put in Calypso hops. So we have some that we've just been messing around with and seeing what kind of flavor profiles we can get from that. And then we're going to find out and see how it changes. Because right now it's the end of October, but in the ground we put them in right after harvest, maybe like a week or two after harvest. And they looked a little weak, a little frail and weak. But now they're starting to look pretty strong, and I'm very excited to see how it turns out next year. And then we get to mess around with that, which would be a lot of fun.
So what's the hardest ingredient to grow and maintain then? Is it those?
What would be the hardest one? Well, it's probably the barley, because it's weather dependent, basically.
Yeah.
Luckily this year we were very, very lucky and fortunate to pull the barley out of the ground the day before it rained for 6 weeks straight. So like, we were talking to a bunch of other farmers in New York State that were growing Tinka, and they just put it in way too late and harvested it way too late, and kind of got some pre-spout germination out in the fields, and can't really do much with that. You can't use that in brewing.
No, wow. Doesn't sound like it.
You're right.
So what was the appeal of the farm brewery for you then? Coming here?
It's now they don't have to deal with hop contracts. I just say, hey, Dieter, can we do this? And he says yes. And just going back to like the roots of brewing, and then see where all your ingredients come from, and especially if we're out there in the field and doing hop yard stuff or taking moisture samples of the barley. I think that's pretty cool, because that kind of gives you like a real hands-on experience. And then when you see the product while it's going to the maltster down in Germantown,
from cradle to grave,
basically.
Yeah. Cradle to stomach.
Yeah. Into my mouth.
I've talked to a bunch of people that, of course, have been involved with beer and brewing beer. What are the challenges when it comes to making cider then, hard cider?
Oh, geez. Well, cider's kind of easy. I don't really do a lot of it, so that makes it easier for me. But
fair point.
But yeah, the way we do it is, we'll press certain apples, and we will just basically just leave them in totes and let them natural ferment. And then, because we're not just going straight with one tote into like a product, we actually do a lot of blending. It's kind of like being like a lambic brewer in Belgium, or like a vintner. So you're basically just taking little batches of this, like, okay, I want 20% of this cider, and then I want 30% of this cider, and then so on and so forth. Like, you do a lot of like titrations, which is kind of cool and very interesting. And then you get these beautiful, unique flavors, which are very, very different from many ciders.
What do you think sets the farm apart here in their ciders?
Oh, geez. It's probably the varieties that we have, and especially the climate, because we're, at the bottom of the Heldenberg Escarpment. So we have some pretty interesting weather patterns over here. And like this year, the apples were great, especially the cider apples. And I think the last one we just did was, I'm going to say this wrong, Davenet? I don't know. But
it tasted well.
It was delicious. That was probably one of the best cider pressings I ever tasted. I'm excited to see how that ferments out, and that'll be really nice.
I forgot to ask Dietrich, but is the stuff only available on the farm? How?
No, we do have. Yeah. We sell a little bit out. Mostly our biggest accounts are down in Brooklyn and Manhattan. Really? Oh yeah.
I had no idea.
But like around here in the Albany area, you can find it at Albany Ale and Oyster, Westmere Beverage, Oliver's. I think Whole Foods now. I think we just got into Whole Foods.
Nice.
Which is fun, because now that we signed with a distributor, it's kind of helped out a lot too. So
that's awesome. I also spoke to Dietrich. I know you guys are basically planning to go to a 20-barrel system up in that new area. Any special recipes or fun things you have cooking right now? Any other ones you're excited about?
Right now, I've got a lot up in my head. I've got a lot in my head. We still have the cool ship out right outside the tasting room, which we use that for our sour beers. So when it comes straight from the kettle, it goes in there hot, and it sits in there overnight to cool down. And then while it's cooling, it's also picking up different types of microbes that are floating around in the air. and then we'll put that right back into a fermenter and kind of give it like its terroir for our sour beers, which is really nice.
Nice. You got any favorite stories since you've started here 6 months ago?
Oh God.
Or any fun brewing mishaps?
Mishap. Well, working on a 3/4 barrel system was really fun. It would take me 3 brews to fill up 1 fermenter. It was a long week. It was like, oh, brewing one day. Okay, I got to put that in there. It's like, okay, now I got to start ramping up the temperature, just going into the fermenters and try to maintain that temperature. And it was a struggle for the first like 2 weeks to get used to that. And now that we can, just put all 93 gallons into 1 tank at 1 shot, makes it so much easier.
Big challenge kind of scaling it down after you were used to larger scale operations.
Yeah, it's been so long. People are always asking me, like home brewers, like, oh, how much hops should I use in this beer? I was like, I don't know, like 2 kilos. And they're like, I don't even know what that means. I'm like, that's a lot. That's probably a lot for a 5-gallon batch. A couple ounces would be fine.
Anything in particular you'd like to see the farm like get into when it comes to brewing?
Not really. I think we're pretty good as is, and it's especially because we're also working really closely with Fraunhofer Designs.
Yep.
I don't know if Dieter told you all about them.
Yep, he mentioned them.
And that's kind of cool that we can deal with them. We have a canning line coming here pretty soon.
Nice.
So that way we don't have to go with mobile canning anymore. We can just do small batch stuff if we want.
That'll be nice, yeah.
And then we can have different arrays of canned product, which is really nice, and people prefer that a lot more than doing bottles. Because you can, like we got hiking trails around here. It's easier just to bring a can.
It is, yeah. If you're going to take it hiking or out and about, yeah.
And it's easier for transporting. Like if people are coming here from, say, they're coming from New Zealand or something like that, and they're like, oh, I want to bring this beer back home, and then they can just, it won't be that bad.
Nice. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I'd like to thank my guests. I thanked Dietrich before. I'll stop down and see him again. Thank you, Stott. I almost said Stott.
He wasn't drinking any ciders, I swear.
No. Non-alcoholic cider, just with the whistle. Thank you, Scott Veltman, brewer here at Indian Ladder, for coming up and talking to me about the brewing a little bit.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you stopping by, hanging out, telling me about brewing on a smaller system. And I can't wait to see over the next couple years it grow. Be sure to check out Indian Ladder Farms. To the millions of people out there that listened, I'm sure there's millions. You can check out their website, their Facebook, keep tabs on the cool stuff they have going on. I know there's some cookouts going down on the weekends here through November. And the cidery and brewery is open year-round.
Yep, we are. We're open Wednesday through Sunday.
You can also find them on Twitter if I didn't mention it as well. Thank you for checking out the show. You can find Stories from a Bar on Facebook. Follow the show on Twitter, Instagram. It's also on YouTube. You'll also find the show on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play. And be sure to subscribe, and even more importantly, leave me a review. Just do it. It doesn't take any effort on your part. Hardly any. Just click 5 stars. So until next time, cheers.